Jenna, thank you for having me. I sure appreciate it. So, again, my name is Roy Short, and I welcome you to the genealogy introduction this morning. How many people have already started a family tree online? Oh, wow. You guys can all leave, because I'm going to show you how to build one. Those of you that did not raise your hand, I presume you're at least interested in genealogy or disappointed there's no bingo this morning. But So the way this is going to work is that I'm going to spend the next 45 minutes or so talking about the elements, the basic elements of genealogy and how you can get started and why you should be interested and what you can expect to learn by exploring this field. And then at the end of today, starting tomorrow, we'll break off into the workshops. And the individual workshops are fun. We're going to do 2 a day, I think, given the size of this crowd. And there we're going to actually do hands-on building of trees and searching for relatives and finding documents online and stuff. And I'll go around and help you if you need it. Now, those of you that raised your hand probably know more than I do, so don't correct me, and that's not polite. Okay, any questions? Good. Let's get started. We'll do questions later. So, okay, this is what we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk a little bit about me because it's all about me. We're going to talk about where you begin if you're confused and never really tried it before. I'll give you some tips on how to get started. Of course, there's some paperwork you might want to do, which to fill out some charts and forms. And I'll briefly talk about those. Interviewing relatives, in my opinion, is a very important aspect of this, and we'll have a workshop on that later, but I'll touch on it today too. The types of records that you're going to be looking for, and then where you're going to find them. And then, of course, everybody wants to know about DNA, and I am not a genetic scientist, but I'll talk a little bit about DNA and share with you what I know. And then, of course, we're going to create your family tree live, and you can be able to take it home with you. And then, first of all, let's see who I am. As Jenna said, I'm a 30-year plus genealogy researcher. Probably longer than that, isn't it? But been doing it a long time. I have Revolutionary War ancestors. I have 17 of them that I've found so far. I am also a Mayflower descendant, which is a big deal. Jamestown Society, which I found to be a little harder to get certified because Jamestown actually started before Plymouth Rock. It started in 1607. But I'm in progress there, and I think I'll make it. Of course, I belong to a bunch of associations, and I've run numerous genealogy clubs and so on. I have certification pending with the board for certified genealogists. That's a very difficult credential to get, and I don't have it yet, but hopefully someday. Of course, I'm a cruise ship lecturer, see? And sometimes I'll do private counseling. I don't do too much of that anymore, but I do some. So the diligence and patience does pay off. I will tell you that the Sons of the American Revolution, which is a similar organization to the Daughters of the American Revolution, is relatively easy to become certified in. The Mayflower Society, however, is much more difficult. The Mayflower Society goes back 10 or 11 generations, and you have to provide 3 pieces of documentation for every birth, death, marriage, and relationship. And if you can't do that, they won't certify you. So I had a hard time getting at that. All right, now why do we do this? I think that there's a lot of reasons. Obviously, the easiest one is to find your lineages. Who were your grandparents? What were their names? When were they born? Learn family history, which not only learn the names and dates, but what are the stories behind their life? Did they fight the Civil War? Did they fight the Indians? Did they have what kind of issues did they have when they were growing up? What kind of stories did you learn when you were a kid? Ethnicity, everybody wants to know. With the advent of DNA science now, it's easier to discover what your true ethnicity is, not what your parents told you, which I guarantee you everyone in this room had a different story from what their parents and what they're going to find in DNA. At least I did. Medical history, it's a little more of a reach, but you can find out how your ancestors died and what illnesses they had by looking at their death records and the cemetery records and so on. And that may give you a clue as to what heretical problems or opportunities you might have. And then, of course, confirm or disprove the folklore. Maybe your great-great-grandfather wasn't in the Civil War. Maybe he didn't fight for the North, he fought for the South. You're going to discover all kinds of cool things. Okay, on this cruise, as I said, we're going to start today. We're going to do hands-on workshops starting tomorrow. I think they're 11 and 3:30, and they're in that room down there I can't pronounce, Torshaven room, whatever it is. Personal guidance, I'll help you as much as I can. So how do we get started? Well, it's a tough one. That's the reason a lot of us haven't started. First thing you want to do is make a plan. You have to identify, before you even start, what is it you want to know? Do you want to know the names and dates of your grandparents or their grandparents? Or do you want to know the stories behind their life? And the reason you want to identify what it is you want to know, believe me, when you get online, and those of you that have built a tree already, you're going to get distracted. You're going to get sent off in all kinds of directions, and you're going to discover new relatives, and it's going to be fun for you to chase them down. But then you lose track of what your goal was. And sometimes you never achieve your goal just because you run out of gas. So make a plan, figure out what you want. Start with yourself. You know, it's important that you start with the easy stuff. You know, put down what you know. Put down what you know about your parents and your siblings and your wife and so on, husband. And then you start working backwards, and you go one generation at a time. For every ancestor you find, you'll have 2 more to research, and that makes it fun. You got to accumulate family documents, and if you're like me, they're everywhere. Other family units have them. They have birth certificates, marriage licenses, funeral notices, obituaries, all kinds of things, which are invaluable when you're researching. Start the online tree. And we're going to do that tomorrow. I mean, each of you that had brought a laptop or an iPad or a cell phone, smartphone with you, we can actually build trees here on board. And then, as I said, interviewing relatives. So that's kind of where we're going here. As I said, we have charts and forms. No, I'm not going to spend too much time on this. I know how boring it is. But there's 2 basic ones. There's a family group record, and there's the ancestral pedigree chart. I want you to look at these. This is a family group record. This depicts one couple and their children, and it describes their nationality, birth, death, occupation, religion, just all you want to know about one family group, and basically one couple and their children. This little guy here is me. And here. Who knew he was going to grow up to be so handsome and successful? That's what the family group record looks like. And again, these are online. You can fill them in online. You don't have to print them out and write them in ink. And then try to do one for as many family units as you can that are in your direct line. Don't bother filling in Aunt Martha's family. You'll get to that later. The other one's the ancestral chart, and it shows you your pedigree. You can display up to 6 generations. It's a good overall view of your family. And this is what this looks like. Now here you see this one shows 4 generations. And again, when, where, and so on about where they're born and died and married. And you can do as many of these as you want. I got tired of doing these after a while. I just do them online, and it's a lot easier. But those are the two fundamental charts you need to start thinking about. Now, again, document what you know. Even if you don't know, make an educated guess. So if you knew your great-grandfather fought in the Spanish-American War, just put down 1890 or something, or 1895. Fill out the charts, like I said. Go ahead and guess. Remember, prepare a plan. What do you want to know? Now, don't spend a lot of money yet. Once you get hooked, you may have to invest. And by invest, I mean spend money. And then start by creating an online tree, which we're going to start with here. All right. Speaking of starting an online tree, there are two popular sites for doing it, at least two that I like. One is Ancestry.com, and I'm sure you've all seen the commercials on TV and are very familiar with this, and we're going to get there. And the other second best one is FamilySearch.org, which is the LDS website, Mormon Church website, and we'll talk about the pros and cons of those. Ancestry.com, the pros, they have a lot of records. My goodness. I mean, they have, at the last count, 20 billion, and they add records at a rate of 2 to 3 million a day. So it's a very rich database. It has a good platform. It's easy to use. It's intuitive. You don't have to spend a lot of time going through tutorials or anything. It's all obvious. They have a lot of good information, so the search results are excellent. So when you search for specific records, there's a good chance you're going to find something. It merges with laptop software. Now, for me, that's important. I use laptop software called Family Tree Maker, and we can discuss the pros and cons of that. But basically what it is, it's a PC or Mac version of the website. So you can fill out information on the PC, and it'll upload automatically to the website, and they'll both stay in sync. So it's a great piece of software. Ancestry is the only one that has it. Multiple membership options, so you don't have to pay big bucks in the beginning. You can put a toe in the water. You can do 15 days for free, and then after that you can go monthly, 6 months, annual, whatever you want. They don't all offer that. Sometimes they only want the whole year. This is an important one. The DNA test that you take through Ancestry is matched to the tree that you have built on Ancestry, and then it predicts relatives that you have based on your DNA results and showing you what common ancestors you have with other people that have taken the test. Very important, very big deal. And you'll get all kinds of emails from people you never heard of saying, I'm your fourth cousin. So what, You can, the nice thing about Ancestry is you can upload DNA from other sources. So if you take a test on 23andMe or MyHeritage or one of the other websites, you can still use those test results on Ancestry. You can build multiple trees. I probably have 6 or 7 trees, and I'm building new ones all the time. And that's a nice feature. You don't have to have the same data. A mobile app. We all have mobile apps now. Ancestry has a good one. And as I said, you can get a 15-day free trial. The con, boy, it can get expensive. Ancestry is not cheap and it's not free. It starts off free, but then once you expire the 15-day trial period, you have to start investing at these rates. So an annual membership will cost you $200 or $300, depending on what extra databases you want. These are some of the extras that they charge for. Newspapers.com is a nice one because it allows you to search thousands of newspapers, particularly in the United States, that allows you to find obituaries, articles about your family. It's really a cool website. Fold3 is the go-to website for military records. That's another subscription, but man, they have millions of records out there, going all the way back to the Revolutionary War, and actually before that. Archives.com is the government agency that stores all of the census records and many other federal records. And then DNA testing costs you more at Ancestry, but everybody charges, and they all charge about the same amount. All right, Family Search is the Werman website. And the pros for that one are it's always free. You never have to pay to do searching on there. So it's a great website to go in and look for stuff. It's easy to use. They have help centers all around, in the United States anyway, all around the country. And I think in Europe they have them all over the place now too, where you can basically walk into an LDS church. They all have genealogy centers. You can get down, sit down at their table. And you can search all of their records as well as search ancestry records and Fold 3 and newspapers.com for free. And then when you get up and leave, you no longer have that privilege. But while you're in that center, you can get on all those websites free. You can view old and scanned documents. The Mormon Church has spent dozens of years scanning and indexing files and records from all their microfilms and all the books and all the documents that they have on file. And we're talking millions here, folks. Oh, I'm sorry. Let me get out of the way here. I told you it was about me. Okay. So they have an army of people that are scanning these documents and indexing them so that people can get the information quickly. So you can find something in the middle of a book somewhere on a shelf, and it'll show up in an index that someone has prepared. Very valuable, very cool. And only Family Search has that. They do have a mobile app, and here's some of the cons. It's a smaller database, so your searches aren't going to be as productive, but they're still better than nothing. You can only build one tree. And I found that to be a big inconvenience for me because I do a lot of researching, and to have only one tree was a little bit of a problem for me. It does not interface laptop software. That may not bother too many people, but it bothered me. It does not yet have DNA testing or merging with the database. So down the road, that could be a problem for you if you want to take advantage of that feature. Other genealogy comparisons, myheritage.com is coming up quickly. It's a very good site. They have good information on there. It's easy to use. They do have DNA testing, but it's still not quite up to snuff with the other two. Archives.com is really just a site where you can go and explore the federal archives. Find My Past, for those of you that are from the UK, that's by far the best website to use to build your tree because they're basically dedicated to the UK. And then there's a lot of others that you can go search on your own. Well, we get the idea. She likes it. So we decided to use Ancestry.com for this series of lectures and workshops. And if you prefer to use one of the others, I'll be happy to assist you with those as well. But just for simplicity's sake, I've chosen Ancestry, and I have an intense tree of about 27,000 people on Ancestry. So it's easy for me to navigate through it. It will be for you too. When you get home, I know you can't interview relatives here unless you have some kind of power I don't know about. But when you get home, I'd like you to start interviewing your relatives and capture their stories. And here's a testimony about why it's important.
My name is Stan Prentice, and the first thing I want to talk to you about is the importance of recording and preserving the stories and experiences of your life or the stories of someone in your family. I'd like to illustrate this by telling a story of my own. When my grandfather died, he left several albums and boxes of family pictures. My mother and I went through them together. There were pictures of family members we didn't know, people having picnics, riding horses, playing in the snow, wonderful pictures. I could easily recognize my grandfather in many of them, but the other people were a mystery. Who were these people? They were obviously important to my grandfather. After all, he had kept their pictures all those years. But I didn't even know who they were or whether they were family. It so happened that a few years later, I had the chance to attend a family reunion at the little town in Washington State where my grandfather had been born and raised. As I later learned, my grandfather's grandfather had come west with his brother from Indiana in a covered wagon. So I brought a bunch of my grandfather's pictures to the reunion to see if anyone in the family could identify them. But no luck. That is, until I had this one wonderful faded picture of a little old rumpled man with a bald head and a white beard. The picture looked like it had been taken around the turn of the last century, and this guy was already old at that time. I passed it around the table to see if anybody knew who this interesting character might be, whether he was even a family member. One at a time, everybody looked at the picture and they shook their heads, said, no, don't know him. But then the photo was passed to a little old lady sitting at the far end of the table. Her name was Myrtle. She had thick glasses and she was pretty frail. I didn't even know what her relation to me was at the time, or even if there was one. But when that picture of that little bearded old man got to her, Myrtle looked at it carefully. A smile came across her lips, and she quietly said, "That's my daddy." Well, I had no idea. It turned out that Myrtle's daddy was one of the two brothers who had come west in that covered wagon. Her daddy was the younger brother of my grandfather's grandfather. Myrtle invited me to her house the next day, and she gave me pictures of my grandfather as a young man, pictures of my great-grandfather, and even my great-great-grandfather. She told me the stories of our pioneer ancestors who had come west from Indiana in covered wagons, tales of crossing raging rivers and broken wagons, and stories of both good and bad relations with local Native Americans. Can you imagine? She was such a treasure, and so were her stories. That was 1981. What I kick myself about today is this. I had a VHS camcorder with me at the time, but I didn't think to turn it on to record Myrtle's stories. Even though I heard a bunch of great stories that day, think of all the treasured family history that was lost. Because the following year, Myrtle died. And I just don't remember all the details of her stories. I could tell you some of the basics, but the little gems of the details were lost forever. I'll never be able to tell her stories in her words with such great detail. These are the reasons that I say your story matters, and why we work to preserve our stories. You may think that the story of your life is nothing special, not worth telling. Many of us think that. After all, we never became famous. We never starred in a movie or ran for governor. Who wants to hear my story, you may ask? Well, let me tell you who would like to hear your story. Your family, that is who. I assure you, your memories and your experiences are valuable, precious gifts that need to be handed down to your children, your children's children, and future generations. Your story matters a lot more than you think. I'd like to start by asking you to think about the answers to a few questions. Here they are. Did you know your grandparents? Do you know what your grandfather did for a living? Do you know what your grandmother did for fun when she was a little girl? Do you know what kind of relationship your grandfather had with his father? You probably knew your grandparents. You may know what your grandfather did for a living, but do you know about your grandmother's childhood? And how did your grandfather get along with his father? Did he ever tell you that? Wouldn't that be an interesting story to hear about? What about the dreams that your grandmother had when she was a young woman? What achievements was she proud of? What were her disappointments in life? What was her greatest joy or deepest sorrow? Don't you wish you could ask your grandparents questions like these today? And don't you think that someday your children and grandchildren will want to know these things about you? Take a look at this box. It's loaded with old black and white family photos. Do you have pictures like this at your house? How about a photo album like this? When you look at your photos, can you identify who the people are? Do you know where or when those photos were taken? Do you have any idea what the people in the pictures are doing or even feeling? Did anybody even take the time to write down who these people were or what was going on in the photos? So many families have their precious pictures stored in albums or boxes that are unlabeled with no stories attached. All the stories of your life, everything you ever learned from your father, every story your mother ever told you, they live in your memories. And when you're gone, those stories will be gone too. All the family stories that were told to you, and especially all the stories that only you can tell about your own life. All the stories that someday your children, grandchildren, and yes, your great-great-grandchildren will wish that you had preserved for them. Remember this, regardless of your financial resources, you are rich in memories, experiences, beliefs, and values. This intangible legacy, your legacy, will be priceless to your family. What will your children or your children's children inherit from you? Maybe some money, yes. Maybe some property. Maybe a little or maybe a lot of stuff. But what is the most valuable thing they will inherit from you? That will be who you are, what you have experienced, and what you have to tell. That's why your story matters. That is your true legacy. That is what you hand down through the generations.
Good advice.
On the road again. Just can't wait to get on the road again.
So when you run out of gas at the kitchen table, you may have to get in the car or maybe an airplane and go find records somewhere else. Family History Centers, as I mentioned, is a great resource for records. The main center is in Salt Lake City. I'll talk about that in a minute. Historical and genealogy societies, I mentioned those, but they're all over the country, and they have libraries and volumes of family information that is not, in most cases, digitized, so you can't find it online. Public libraries, again, they don't have the resources to scan and index all these files, so they're all in books or manifests that are sitting on shelves. So visit your public library. They all have genealogy departments. Courthouses, of course, again, are underfunded, and they don't have the ability to scan and index all of the birth records, marriage records, wills, criminal records, probates, all that kind of stuff. So you have to go in the dusty shelves and actually find them for yourself. The National Association of Resources is another good place. Churches, for hundreds of years have kept records. Again, many times they're not digitized and you can't find them online. So you have to physically go to the church and get permission to look at their archives. They're usually pretty good about it. Cemeteries, of course, have basic birth and death information, but they often in the cemetery office will have records showing the ancestors and a lot of other relationships that you may not even know about. Family History Centers, very quickly. Salt Lake City, they were founded to gather and store genealogical information since the late 1800s. And it's a requirement to be a member of the Mormon Church that you actually establish what your family tree is. Please provide, and they provide microfilms and microfiche libraries in the Family History Library, which you can sit the old-fashioned crank and kind of crank through them, and you can photograph them and bring them home. And it's sponsored by the Church of Jesus Christ Latter-day Saints, but it's open to everyone, and they're very nice people. They don't prophetize. They don't try to get you to join a church or make you feel guilty or anything like that. You just go in, they're all smiles, and they help you. It's great. They have local centers, too, around the country, as I mentioned. And in the public libraries, it's a good place to begin. They have genealogy sessions. They also have newspapers, street directories, local history books, and so on. They may even have church and funeral records, actually. And they have a database that you can further search when you're there. And again, most libraries don't charge anything, maybe a very small fee to join. and they all have computers and Wi-Fi now. Courthouses, again, is a little bit different story. Your experiences of courthouses are anything like mine. They're not always the friendliest and welcomingest people. But I found that as long as you don't go in with an attitude and you go in polite and you ask him, may I see this record, may I see that record, and, can I get it for you? Let's, be polite about it. They're usually pretty polite back and you give it back to you. It's not really in their interest, I don't think, to help you. So you're going to have to make it easy for them. They're all different. Some are really nice and some are not. But this is the kind of records you could find there, and they will tell you how to search for them and where to look them up. Sometimes they have it online on their little computer, but it's not online on the internet. The National Archives and Record Administration is the big government storage facility where they store all the census records, all the military records, all the records from Congress and all that stuff. Okay, let's talk a little bit about DNA testing. We're going to run out of time, I'm afraid. Stop that music. It's used to support other evidence. DNA testing is not designed to prove anything. About the only thing it will prove is it'll prove someone is not related to you, but it doesn't necessarily prove who is. And testing databases are growing quickly, and the more and more people that take tests, of course now we're in the millions of people that have been tested with DNA. As those databases grow, you're going to have more and more success finding people that match. You got to temper your expectations. As I said, don't go in there thinking you're going to find out you're related to George Clooney. Maybe you are, but the DNA test isn't necessarily going to tell you that. So here's another quick film. I don't know if we have time to show this.
Introduction to Molecular Genealogy. A family tree.
I'm going to skip that for now. I'll go over that in the DNA session that we have. And basically what it suggests is that the DNA research is a merger between your family tree and the DNA results. And that's what they call genetic biology. And so that's what they use to predict not only nationalities, but also matches that you have with other people that have taken a test. And they give you a percentage of probability that this person is a third cousin, fourth cousin, and so on. Does not guarantee anything because DNA is transferred from your parents to you in a random fashion. So you may get a set of DNA that differs from this, and you will get a set of DNA different from what your brother gets, or what your sister gets, or what their children get. And that's because it's all random the way it's passed down. And there's lots of things that go wrong in the process. And so the tests are unconclusive. There's a Y-DNA test, which tells you what the male line is. And the Y chromosome is what's passed from one male to another. The mitochondrial DNA is the female line. And that shows you information about the females in your family. And it's passed down unchanged from the mother to all the children, not just the females. And it does disprove siblings. Autosomal testing is now the rage, and that's what most people are doing. And this is a generic test which, of the 23 pairs of chromosomes that are passed down through the DNA, autosomal tests 22 of them. The only one it doesn't test is the sex genealogy, the sex of the contributor. And it's inherited equally from the parents, and therefore the number of markers inherited is about half for each generation. So every time you go farther up the tree, it becomes diluted, and you get less and less. So by the time you go 4 generations, you get 32 or so different relatives involved in your DNA. And so that's really not a very good test to suggest anything. Ethnicity percentages, of course, I mentioned. It'll tell you, in general, where that DNA was originated. Now, what they did, what Ancestor and other databases have done, is that they've identified dozens of regions in the world where DNA may have originated. Some are large, some are small. And as they add more tests to the database, those regions will get bigger. So basically, your DNA result will come back and say, well, you're from Central Europe. And you say, well, big deal. I knew that. I want to know if I'm from Austria or if I'm from Liechtenstein. It won't tell you that. It will someday in the future. So basically what they do is they take 4 or 5 generations in one of these regions, and they try to identify people who have similar DNA those 4 or 5 generations, and they kind of categorize that as a family. So when you take your test, if your DNA hits one of those characteristics, it'll say, hey, there's a match. And based on the percentages of the DNA and how many chromosomes are matched, we have a degree of certainty that they're a relative. So then you have to kind of find out who else got the same result, who you have shared ancestors with, send them an email and say, hey, I had a hit with you in a database. This is who I think I'm related to. Who are you related to? And you can get that conversation started. They're often productive and often not, but it's a way to continue on. Of course, a lot of people use it for maternity and paternity to find out, who the parents of someone are. And it won't show you, as I said, relationships to famous people. It won't show you relationships to someone who hasn't taken the test. How could it? It'll give you some medical and disease information, but that's actually a different test, and it's a lot more expensive. So if you want to really find that information out, you're going to have to investigate some of the other DNA sources out there. And of course, it won't, as I said, it won't tell you absolute relationships. And these are the best places to do the tests. Family Tree DNA, which is one of the more famous ones, they have a good testing system. Ancestry I like because it merges it with your family tree. MyHeritage is coming up. It's actually a pretty good test for the money. And 23andMe does do some genetic health screening, and that gives you nice generic information that you can upload to Ancestry or Family Tree and so on. Now, people are starting to talk about GEDmatch, and GEDmatch is a generic database where people upload their DNA results, usually anonymously, and all they want to know is if there's anybody else out there in the world that's contributed their DNA that I might have a match to. So they don't go through Ancestry or MyHeritage or any of that stuff. This is just a generic worldwide GEDmatch system. What's nice is that you can be anonymous and you don't have to worry about disclosing any personal information. Now, this is what they use when they try to solve crimes. And most of us are familiar with the recent case of a Golden State Killer, whom they found because they were able to match his DNA that they acquired from a rape kit that he had generated with some GEDmatch DNA that was uploaded by relatives that he didn't even know. So they said, aha, here's a GEDmatch with this rape kit that we had. We didn't have this 5 years ago. And so they were able then, by virtue of where that DNA came from and where those people were living at the time these murders were committed, they were able to narrow down the search to I think like 12 or 13 people that had a match in DNA that were from the same region at the same time that these murders occurred. And they were able then to just narrow the field down and ultimately identify them. And this was many years after the crimes were committed. So now this is a very sophisticated, very important method for identifying killers. And we're going to have a DNA workshop later on in the voyage where I get more of your questions answered about that. Okay, so how are we doing here? Oh, we're out of time. So we're going to get into the tree tomorrow, so don't worry. We'll get there. And I'm going to help you do it. We'll do it live, and I'll be there to help you. I was going to do a tree building exercise here if we had time, but basically all that does is just show you how to get started, and it's redundant. This is true, boy. It was true with me. Once I got started, my wife sitting there will tell you that once I got started, I was just a fiend at trying to find more information. Now, there's another video I was going to show you, but unfortunately not going to have time. And this was an expert video. I'll try to show it during the workshops. I think we'll have more latitude there in terms of what we do. Okay? So let's skip through this. And I apologize for the technical problems. I'm going to fix those, I guarantee you. The workshops are going to do a build a tree tomorrow. We're going to talk about interviewing relatives the next day. How you search Ancestry, which is an important one. Then how you find census record information and vital records like birth certificates and death certificates and so on. We're going to talk about that. Make sure you bring your laptop or your phone or your tablet, whatever you have with you. Even if you don't have the electronic device with you, come anyway. You could still observe and learn some things. So the first one's tomorrow at 11 o'clock in the morning, and it's in that little room back there, whatever the heck the name of it is. Torschwan, right? Something like that. And lastly, I have a website, shortontime.com, short-ontime.com. And on that website, I will have links to everything that I show you during the voyage. So if you're wondering how did I get to that, how did I get to this, and I'm lost, you can go on my website, click on my link there, and it'll show you where all the forums are, and all these movies are up there, all that stuff. So, okay, that's it. Thank you for coming. Boy, time goes fast up here.
Lived a prehistoric fellow who loved a maid in court.